Hello, Sarah. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Leanne. Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited for today.
I'm really excited for this conversation. Um, I want to introduce you first as someone who works in the healing realm. You're a holistic therapist, clinical hypnotherapist, and transformational spiritual healer. So I imagine that you work in many forms and in many ways with many different levels of trauma and healing and awakening and all of the things that come from that work. But we're here today to talk about religious trauma and what can happen in the midst of it and what can happen when we're working our way out of it. So I thought it'd be interesting for you to introduce yourself, tell us how you've come to this work, but also why this particular topic might be something you specialize in or that is important to you.
Yeah, I'm happy to. My path to my field and my work is I would link it all the way back to childhood. I grew up in a home that was very broken. And on this topic of religious trauma, I grew up in a Christian home. I did. But it was very, very broken home, very chaotic, very scary for me. And religion was used a lot as kind of a blanket, almost as almost in a way of spiritual bypassing to like excuse bad behavior or excuse behavior that we wanted to do and then get somebody else to do what we wanted them to do. But that's not why I think I initially got into healing. I got into healing because I felt trapped in myself and I had so much mental baggage and so much mental confines from my experience growing up. I had a severe eating disorder as a young girl. I almost died twice. I was cutting. I ended up being raped in high school, abusive relationships, narcissistic relationships. So I have my fair share of healing to do. And I have always been obsessed and fascinated with humans and how we work from an emotional standpoint, psychological standpoint, like what makes up this human experience. So I've always been kind of connected to this other realm, if you would say. And I even have out of body memories, experiences as a young girl, but could never understand it. And the church doesn't explain that to you. No, nobody explains that, the spiritual aspect of who we are to us. And so I kind of self-discovered everything. I went on an obsessive journey inward, outward, to find out who we are, what we're doing here, what's this thing called the human experience, what's the spiritual aspect of ourselves. And I would also say, though, that for me, this is a part of my divine purpose. So while I wouldn't encourage everyone to just go self-explore and like figure it out, because spiritual awakening and the process of healing is very murky, it's very layered, it's very complex. It worked for me because of the fact that I do think that I was quite literally placed here, put here, sent down here to do this work. And so I can't take all the credit. There's a divine compass within me
Yeah.
that pulled me to that. And ironically, Leanne, for the religious portion of it, I wouldn't even necessarily classify myself as experiencing religious trauma, but I have a divine and yeah, I would just call it a divine discontent in seeing how religion harms people and it does the opposite of what it's intended to do, what it was intended to do, I suppose. And we can go down that rabbit hole, but it just irks me. It hurts me. It hurts me to the core to see that we are attaching something as important as spirituality to healing, even though that's the very thing that harms us a lot of times.
Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. I relate. I relate. I relate. Same. I'm kind of a wholesale, like, go for it kind of person. So I did the same. I went on a really deep sojourn to figure out if it wasn't religion, what is happening? Because I felt deeply connected and deeply spiritual. So I was like, the religion isn't fitting because a lot
Yeah.
of it felt oppressive, negative, fear based. And I didn't want to live fear based. I wanted to live with expansion and possibility, which I believed was God. And so there was this conflicting message for me of okay, if I'm divinely made, yes, I quote unquote sin, but it felt like that was the focal point of my goodness, is the
Mm.
level or the quantity of sinning that I had done. And so it was like,
How
is this
sinful are
what,
you?
how
Let's rate
sinful
you.
are you? Kinda. So similar to you, there's trauma is an interesting word. It's a very interesting word because it can be defined as many different things
Hmm.
and many different extremes. And I don't want to make light of real damage, real lasting damage done to people through the church in the name of God.
Hmm.
I think any measure of that is not done in good faith. But I especially want to honor those who are truly suffering from sustainable or prolonged or deep wounds
Yep.
from their religious experience. I too would not classify it as trauma per se. I would say I was in deep confusion because I
Yeah.
didn't understand what my experience was in relationship to what I was being told was
Oh, yeah.
true.
Yeah.
And it was interesting when I just wrote a piece on the blog called My Complicated Relationship with Religious Holidays because I came through Easter and the Pope's death going, what I was something was stirring in me as discontent. And I was like, oh, it's because I'm a deeply spiritual person and I have nowhere to worship and no organized group of people who are reflecting back to me how I feel about the world and my relationship with the spirit realm. And so I wrote a whole piece on this because I had a hunch it wasn't just me. And so by no coincidence, here we are a couple of days later recording about what is coming out of religion and into this self-discovery of spirituality, which can have many different phases and looks. And how it's interesting that in and of itself, that discovery, that questioning, that excitement about what is God can even be judged, by
Or
people who are
quantified.
or quantified. Can
Yeah.
you talk about how this kind of thing, when we're trying to kind of wiggle our way through or away from this more negative fear-based belief system that we will call organized religion, and how we are transforming into maybe a freer, more open, more conscious version of ourselves. And how does that show up in our body, our mind, our experience as we're kind of wiggling our way to that in that direction?
Oh man, yeah, what a deep question, right?
Yeah.
So the first part of the question was how we are getting away from the negative fear based, is that right?
Yeah.
Well, I
Hmm.
think COVID had a lot to do with that. I think that, and for whatever reason, we both know, but there are a lot of spiritual forces happening right now, in the name of spirituality to provoke people. I wouldn't even say awaken because some people are, some people are not, but I would just say provoke. And oftentimes we view that as like dark or negative or demonic or whatever that may be. And it certainly well may be. However, I think that if we are to discover what all this really is, we have to take this childlike viewpoint once more. Again, we have to revert a little bit to this kind of openness. With that comes some danger, of course, because when we open ourselves, we're also opening ourselves up to, well, a lot of traps, a lot of spiritual traps, a lot of um, um, other traumatic events, because I've seen a lot of trauma in the kind of like new age spiritual realm with, spiritual bypassing and faux healers and faux teachers and things like that. But what I notice in the people, and by the way, one of the most common things that I hear when people come to me is that they have religious trauma. That's like number one. I have this religious trauma, but I know there's something more. And I know I'm supposed to do something more, and I'm trying to figure that out. And so I often find that how it shows up in the body is it shows up as agitation. It shows up as agitation. It also shows up as like curiosity and desire for the feeling of expansion, desire for the experience of discovering who I am. Why am I here? What is all of this mean? And so again, like I said, it's this reversion back to the childlike, and this is also this discontent of like, I, we can see now the gap, right? Like, oh my God, my life is not set up the way that I am happy. I'm not fulfilled. All these things, like the people in my life, I think need to change. And we suddenly realize that, and this may be part of the awakening, we start to awaken to the fact that perhaps we have set up our life based on a set of circumstances that were given to us, based on the definition of what's good, what's holy, what's bad, what's you know what's spiritual and what's not spiritual, right? What's, like you said, what's sin and what's not, and what do I need to do in living this life in order to, you know, get to heaven someday after I die. And meanwhile, we forget about the whole living experience. And so people call it a midlife crisis. People call it, a black hole of this experience, and the body feels it. But I will say, the body feels it in a negative way if we resist it. The more we resist the process, the body feels that too, because we are not meant to be confined in that way. These are some of the things that I think, but I also think that, um, you know, I have had some pretty intense religious trauma experiences with people reflecting to me where they were, literally told, people are told that sex is shameful and that they can't even have sex with their wife or their husband or these types of things. And it's interesting with the folks that come in, it's almost as if we are wired for the truth,
Mm-hmm.
where they hear it and they're like, it doesn't sound right. It doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel right in my body. I feel constricted. I feel bad. I feel a lot of negative feelings and thoughts, but like perpetuate from that place. But yet there's this social conditioning that we still do it anyways. Do you know what I mean?
I do. Yes.
So it's like
Hmm.
this inner incongruence where my body and my intuitive side is telling me something's off here. But the logical part of me says, well, look how big this church is, or, they're the authority in this realm. Who am I to question what they're saying? And so there's a moment, I think, for all of us when it becomes like, no, not anymore.
Yeah.
And I wonder, there's got to be more. There's got to be more,
Yeah.
right? And the answer is there is.
Yes. Yes. Beautiful. Yes. Yes. And all yes. It was interesting when I was doing my journeying away from like, what have I been taught and what do I know is true to me? Like what feels true to me. And I was trying to pull those two apart because as you mentioned, that conditioning can be deep, profound,
Deep,
especially
very
if it
deep.
happens from birth and it is family, it's lineage, it is tradition, and it is also eternal, right? There's a lot going on here. I was trying to pull those apart. And I had this moment of like, I could actually feel my spirit that's wired for truth arguing with my logical mind that's telling me this can't be true. What you're feeling can't be true because of all the things you quote unquote know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So that's the conditioning. I know it. But the wiring, what I was born with, was like, no, something else is happening here. And
Yeah.
here's the crazy thing. When I let go of those, when I allowed the separation of what I believed and what I know, I actually felt more in a line with God,
Yes.
spirit, realm, the divine all. I felt like a through line come through because I got in the head, my brain out of the way.
Mm-hmm.
And the deeper I went down that rabbit hole, the more connected I felt. And I learned eventually that this is called, what I was suffering from before that break was called the myth of separation, where we
Mm-hmm.
believe we have to go through something or someone or something else to get into right relationship with God, who is us and in us, right? And that is a myth. We are not at all separated. And part of that myth of separation is stemming from really bad things like control and fear and wanting sort of this group think about things so that we're all aligned with a way of thinking. And so it can be really deeply lonely to allow that break. It can be
So,
terrifying.
and I think that it's supposed to be. And here's the reason why, right? I think that in order for us to fully discover who God is and what the nature of being is, what the nature of being actually human, and I would like to talk about that in a moment of what it means to actually be human, because we are totally misguided in that, by the way. Is that I do think the journey, that portion of the journey, portions of the journey, I should say, do need to be solo, because this is an individual relationship, right? And this is the part that people miss. And I love that you said the illusion of separation. There's a reason for that, by the way. It's called the ego of man. The ego of man is power hungry. They want power, they want control, and they want, yeah, well, that's basically it, power and control. And they also want to make them, we also want to make ourselves God, right? But the truth is that, I do believe in Jesus. Jesus is that is my belief system. However, what irks me to my core is seeing how totally distorted the messaging of Jesus has been created, in the fact that his existence was, first of all, number one, positioned against religion. It was in exact opposition to the message that he's saying here, right? He's saying, no, like, I am in you, you are in me, we are one, like all of these things, this togetherness, like you said, this union, right? But number two is he came to show us how to be human. And being human, by the way, is not being in the ego.
Right.
It is having the ego, because that's a part of the human, that's an aspect of humanity, but it is also being fully divine. And he didn't just say, I'm here to do this because I'm the only one who could do it. I'm here to show you how to do it because there's a way to do it for you, to have that level of consciousness, to be fully human and to be fully divine. And we're missing it. We're just totally missing it. With religion being this sort of, here are the rules that you need to follow, and so that when you die, you go to some place that's not here, that's either great or awful. Oh my God, talk about like,
Right.
talk about how the hell do I know if I meet those criteria, right? Like,
It's like,
who's going to tell me?
it's terrifying. And when you're a
But
child, you're like, what? Yeah, go on.
yes, and number two, it's like we literally, hey, this is such a gray area at times, at least it can be, because there are really good aspects that religion has done.
Yes,
But at the same
absolutely.
time, though, we have to have this harmony. And this brings me to kind of a more of a mystical topic of the masculine, feminine nature of God that people don't like to talk about. It's like the ruling, father with the iron fist and something like that.
Yeah.
But what has happened is this patriarchal design has driven us all the way over here, because we have to understand the nature of God, the nature of God being masculine, feminine. Actually, that's probably way too simplistic to even talk about it that way. There's really like, it's non-gender based, but there's the duality of the structure, the order, system, justice, these types of things, as well as creation, feeling, flow, resting, being, these types of things. When we go too far to one extreme of the spectrum, we lose it. And that is what religion has done. It has gone too far to one end of the spectrum, plus ego and power, which is the wounded masculine aspect of things. And now we lost God.
Yeah.
Now we have disconnected from God.
Right.
God has not disconnected from us, but we have now tapped out of that frequency. We've tapped out of the nature of being. And I like that you said the all, because that's like a better term for God. It's like God is a name, whereas it's like, how do you put a name to this? This
The all in
essence.
everything. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
quite literally the all in
The
everything.
all in
Yeah.
everything, the unbroken.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes, yes, exactly. And the best word I have for that is just love.
Yeah.
And we have so many extreme ends of this spectrum, and it's the religious trauma. But ultimately, how religious trauma works is by the nature of power and control and fear.
Yeah.
And by the
Mhm.
way, we have to go back to the roots here a little bit. Why was church created and religion created in the first place?
Order.
And finances
Yep.
and power.
Yep.
The churches that the most of the churches, they operate by being having to be under the statute of government.
Yeah.
And whenever we have something like that, we have lost God.
Yep.
Period.
Yeah. Originally it was like the Grimm's fairy tales, where you were threatened by this sort of this societal moral dilemma of natural consequence, right? But it was terrifying. And so that was how this society was educated around good and bad, or this is what we do and this is what we don't do. And then religion entered the scene and became the ultimate version of that, because here you have this God, this human form of God dying for you, right? So now you have a debt. So now you've mixed in fear, guilt, duty, and all of these things that come into it. What was interesting, I went through a phase where I completely rejected all names of God and the idea of Christ and all of it. Because I was like, there's probably many Christs, and it wasn't until a few years ago when I became a Reiki practitioner that when I revisited some of the texts and some of the stories of Christ, I was like, oh my gosh, no wonder he was such a catalyst. No wonder he was such he was so catalyzing, really. He was stirring things up.
He's a system buster.
He was an energy healer. He was counterculture in a lot of ways, in that he was coming in and saying, no, we can all do this. We can all heal. We can all be blind and see again. We can all be healed. And what's so fascinating to me is that he was, not that this is a conversation particularly about Christ. My point is actually that after my rejection of that whole thing, the more I got into energy healing and the more I got into this idea that my relationship with the divine all is just that, it's expansive and it's always expanding, the more I understood what Christ's life was about, and the more I started relating to what being Christ-like actually meant.
It means, yes, yeah.
Can you talk about that, your perspective on what Christ-like living or behavior or those, what am I trying to say, attributes are?
Oh, I would love to. It's so fascinating, right? Because this is often the case, right? When religious trauma happens, what tends to happen is we throw the baby out with the bathwater, because now everything associated with that is bad, and it didn't do good for me, and all these things, and it hurt me, and all these things, which is a natural response for most humans to do. So we throw everything out, and then we go on this self-discovery, and most of the time we come back to some of the core things, right? Doesn't mean that everything was false, but a lot of it was. But there are aspects that ground us. And so my approach to all of this is like, people always ask you, like, oh, what religion do you practice? And I say, I don't practice one. I'm a Christ follower. I follow Christ's ways. And it's very simple. And in a way, it is very simple. It's just to follow his example.
Yeah.
Christ was a system buster. He was a no BS kind of guy. He told the truth always, all the time. He loved always, all the time. However, he loved differently, right? You look at examples of the way that he loved differently his disciples, or Mary Magdalene, for example, which I have my beliefs about that. Okay. I think that there was a deep union between those two. That was the spiritual example of how we are to embody union. And because why not? Why would that not be an aspect of Christ's existence if he was
Right.
fully human?
Yep.
Anyhow, that's not the point. The point is that he led with love always. Okay. And that he also led with freedom. So if we are to embody that, then we are to embody the fact that we are, number one, free. We were born free. right? It's not something we have to fight for, by the way. We are always free. No matter what is happening in our life, we are free. We're free to make the choices. We're also free to accept the consequences. To the point where Christ said, no man can take my life. He actually escaped death a couple of times because it was like, no, it's not my time. They're not going to take my life. I'm going to give my life. I mean, like how like goat level is that? That's like savage level of spirituality that we're talking about. He's like, no, I know I'm supposed to die, but you're not going to take my life. I will give it. I'll lay it down. So this is freedom. That's true ultimate freedom to have the ability to live that way. But here's the truth of it, right? That level of freedom comes with a level of responsibility and a burden as well. Christ was hated. He was ridiculed. He was betrayed. He was killed and tortured. So do we really have the gall? Do we have the faith, the courage, and the spiritual wisdom to be able to live that way? And the answer is, I think we're all seeking that. And we all can. It just takes an immense level of courage. And the second aspect is love. Love comes with boundaries. Love comes with like, I don't care who you are. I love you. However, like here are there are also these things that there are examples when he didn't even he only let certain disciples around certain healing sessions. It's because he had trust in some and less in others. So, but I think his ability, and here's the point I'm trying to make with all this, the ability that Christ had to transcend all of these kind of human restrictions. Oh, but what will they think? Oh, but what will they do? I can't say that because then they're gonna put me in jail. Or there was nothing that could confine the character. And because of that, he was fully connected to the source. To this mystical, magical, spiritual, and you hear about the miracles that he did, and what did he say? You can do all of these things and then more.
Yep.
You can.
Yep.
Will you is the question.
Yeah.
And so our ability to transcend kind of like the egoic confines or human confines that we create, by the way, humans create those, is going to be directly proportional to the level of spiritual power that we are able to manifest in this world. And that's why he's the GOAT.
Yeah.
Because he came to show us how to do it.
I love it. I sometimes imagine what would happen if Christ came back and like busted through the doors. And what would he say? And sometimes I imagine
it's like gives you these like chills.
And sometimes I imagine he's like, what are you all doing? Like, what are you all doing? Why are you looking at me? You guys, you are God. You are the illuminated fractal of the divine itself.
So I like that you said illuminated. I like that you said illuminated because check this out, right? There is an aspect, and that the only aspect that can do this to us, because I do believe that other forces, I only believe in one power, but I do believe there are other forces, forces that go against the light and against love. But check this out, right? The very nature of the Holy Spirit, like the spirit that we're talking about, the all, the one, the being, I like to call it the being because it's just the being. The kind of verb of that is to illuminate.
Oh.
So when the human is with the spirit, it literally illuminates the human spirit. That is what it means. And that's not to say that everybody has that, by the way, because some people reject it.
Yeah.
And you can do that. That's totally your choice. Totally your choice. But you know when somebody has the spirit because you look at them and you're like, I don't know, you just have this glow about you. You just have this something about you. You know that feeling. Everybody, listeners know that feeling. When you're around people that have that and you're like, I don't know, there's just something about you.
Beautiful.
That's it. That's what enlightened, right? What does it mean to be enlightened? And it means to be illuminated from the inside of the soul.
There you go. Yeah. I love that word.
Me too.
I do. It's overused, but there is such a magic to these words and misunderstood. Yeah, and that is a very interesting aspect of this, that the more I felt in alignment with Christ's teachings or a Christ-like life, not that I was out touting being Christ-like, don't get me wrong, but the more I aligned with the feeling that I was like tapping into something, and I was like, oh, this is what that means, that sense of freedom and liberation, that sense of belonging to myself, that
Hmm.
sense of wholeness,
Yeah.
that sense that I am not flawed and I am not here to operate in this kind of disjointed, disconnected way, but I'm actually meant to feel good most of the time. This was
Yeah.
my first aha, was like, oh, this is what feeling good feels like. I'm supposed to feel like this most of the time. Wait a minute,
Oh,
what have I been
man.
doing this whole time?
That is
And
such a good point.
what is so interesting about feeling good is it makes you suspect, because so much of organized religion is around this penance. Is that right? Penance.
Hmm.
This payment for, this guilt for, after all, it's because of us that this guy died, right? So we are constantly in a state of making up for this thing we've caused, this ultimate thing that we've caused, which is somebody to die for our blessed sins, right?
Yeah, our
And so
imperfections.
our imperfections. And so when I started to reframe sin as that there isn't such a thing, that we are simply operating in a human experience.
Uh-huh.
And sometimes that has challenges that bring about outcomes. And sometimes that brings different challenges that bring about different outcomes. Right or wrong, you decide. I'm not calling it either anymore. It just is. And so this is what was so interesting, was the that I became actually less trustworthy. I became sort of like, what is happening there? Because I was so in love with my life.
Yeah.
And because I wasn't touting Christ or God as the reason, because I started to see how we're in alignment, I know I didn't feel compelled to have to say that anymore. It wasn't that it wasn't true. It was that I didn't feel I had to give credit outside of myself anymore. And it's a completely misunderstood process of actually belonging to God and God belonging to you, and you are one,
Yeah.
is seen as, weirdly, and let's talk about this, is seen as not not faithful, not in alignment with God. I mean, can we unravel that a little bit? Like, what is
Well,
that
and
about?
what I hear you saying too is the importance to discern between like all of these definitions, right? And if I say this needs to be one thing, like this is God and I am me, or God is God and God is in me, means that I am one. I am actually a collaborative extension.
Yeah,
I'm not God myself.
right.
Let's
Thank
just
you.
call that
Here
what
we
it
go.
is, right?
Yeah,
I'm not God, because that,
yeah.
let's be very honest about that. However, I am an important extension of God if I should allow it to be that way. So it is this very seamless collaboration that one can't start to distinguish, where does the line get drawn between that was me and that was God, or was all of it all of it? And, going back to sin, this interesting topic, even Jesus himself said that there's no such thing as sin. We create sin in our minds. We have choices, right? Some choices lead to disharmony in humanity. Some choices lead to harmony in humanity. Some choices lead to pain for others, which isn't the loving way, right? If my choices lead to pain and suffering of another human being, then I'm out of alignment with love, which is God.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Point blank. That's just period. And
Yeah.
if we all lived that way, well, have utopia, right? That we would have heaven on earth. I believe that we have the ability to do that, to bring heaven to earth. I think that's what our purpose is. But to say like it takes two to tango. It takes God's favor and God's being, because there in order for us to do this, we have to understand the nature of God. And the nature of God is not,
Yeah.
if you're not watching, I'm wagging my finger and shaking it with you with a scowl on my face, right? God is abundant, love, gracious, creation. that is people say, what's the life force of the universe? It's creativity. It's
Yeah.
creation. So if I
Yeah.
know that to be the nature of God, that if that's God's essence, well, then anything else is not God's essence.
Hmm.
So it's not guilt, it's not depression, it's not worry and anxiety and fear and all of these things. And if I'm feeling that, then why? Right? There's
Hmm.
something that's something that I'm contributing to this process that's not God doing that. I can choose to step into that frequency, that field, and always be in a collaborative effort with God, and I could have joy. And oh, by the way, another aspect of God is pleasure.
Yes.
Okay,
Thank you.
we cannot forget about that. And
Yes.
people, what? No, pleasure is bad. No, pleasure is a nature of God, and He wants us to
Yeah.
be in pleasure. That's sexual pleasure included, of course, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
But that's all sorts of pleasure, right? There are different levels to pleasure. There's the physical part of pleasure. Mind pleasure is like happiness. God forbid you be happy.
I know, right?
But the spiritual level of pleasure is joy.
Yeah.
So
Right.
joy is of the spirit, happiness of the mind, and then pleasure of the body and the senses.
Yeah.
And we're meant to experience that. We're meant to experience that in a holy, godly way, which means not to basically be slaves to our senses, be slaves to these types of things. Again, coming back to freedom. All these things feel like they go in a loop, Leanne. It's like the circular thing where it's like, yeah, I mean, there's some really basic fundamental things here. Am I free or am I not?
Yeah.
Do I feel like my pleasures control me, my temptations control me, or am I the one who's leading the way here?
Hmm.
It's a
Beautiful.
pretty easy distinguishing factor to make. But when you were talking about, like, all the things that the churches make you feel, I wrote down something. It's like it's almost they kind of phrase things to make you feel bad for just even being created,
Yeah.
because you
Oh,
were
yeah.
created as a human being,
Yeah.
and that's the nature of your humanness.
Yeah.
Oh
It's a
gosh,
little bit messed up. It's a lot messed up because we are actually set up for failure in that mindset
yeah,
because we've not only come in already having lost, but we're also separated. And we're
yeah,
not shown a way back other than through some external force of believing, belonging, seeking seeking retribution and also seeking approval. So if there's somebody
yeah.
outside of us that's determining our holiness or determining our level of likelihood for salvation, if somebody externally is determining those things, then we are also beholden to please them, seek approval from them, seek affirmation from them. And there is the myth of separation. We're not meant to do that. And the word that keeps coming up for me in this is permission for me to make that choice. So, permission was a really big word for me at the very beginning of my latest iteration of my journey back to myself. There's been many, but the latest iteration that started during COVID was, what does it feel like? What does it mean to feel good? I felt like I was proving how worthy I was of my life by how much I suffered. So I had to collapse into
Hmm.
rest. I had to collapse into cocktail on a Friday night. I had to collapse into binge watching because I could justify the addiction or the propping myself up with this reward if I had proven that I literally had nothing left to give. And I would take myself to a place where I had nothing left to give. And so for me,
Yeah.
the first step was permission to just feel good for the sake of feeling good because we were made sensual beings for a reason. And sensuality has been hijacked as sexual, but it isn't. I'm here to say it isn't. Like your toes in the sun is
Yep.
sensual and
Yes.
amazing.
Going outside and just closing your eyes and feeling the sun on your face is sensual.
Yes.
You know what I mean? It's
Yes.
so this is definitely an aspect that has been highly perverted in both ways, and I'm glad you brought that up.
Well, I think or I actually would argue, not that I have to here, but I would put forth that this is a really big piece of the puzzle that gets trapped, literally locked up and locked
Hmm.
down in our journey to finding a way back to ourselves when we're pulling away from the more religious and more restricted aspect of living. And I think I was surprised, having been out of the church as long as I was, that I still was getting caught up in the pleasure part. I was still getting caught. So then I was like, well, Leanne, what is pleasure? I was like, pleasure for me is the ability to start my day slow. Pleasure for me is saying no. It was like, if I feel dysregulated, the ability to stop and breathe.
Yes.
So these were these little gifts, these little tiny gifts I was just placing in my path every day that was allowing me to regulate and realign with myself. And they were
I
teeny
want to,
tiny.
I
Yeah,
just want
please jump
to,
in.
because you are just igniting so many thought bubbles for me. Why do we have this vision of pleasure? And the second question would be, why is it so important? Why is pleasure so important in the spiritual walk, this true spiritual walk? And here's what it is, right? Whenever something is under attack by man's doing, you have to stop and say, hold on, what's here? Because think about what you just said, my ability to start to have a slow morning, to pause when I feel like I'm going too fast and breathe. What are you doing? You're connecting. So this attack
To
on
what?
pleasure,
What am I connecting
ex
to?
to the source, to
Yes.
all, to the
Yep.
being. And this is why pleasure has been attacked so much, because
Mm,
it is our direct connection to God and to the source. And that is why it's so important that we bring it back to life.
yeah.
And also, what does pleasure lead to in union?
Babies. Well,
Creation. You got it. Creation and Shekinah. Shekinah is the presence of God. Shekinah is there is a unique presence of the Shekinah in the bedroom, which is called the bridal chamber, by the way.
yes.
And where does Christ go for his, all of this? To the bridal chamber. The bridal chamber is very important. There is a unique presence of the Shekinah in the bedroom through the source of pleasure and
Yeah.
sensuality and
Yeah.
also conscious love.
Yes.
So of course that's attacked.
Oh, yeah. Because man, when you tap into that level of God, it is unbelievable. And I mean, yes, bedroom version. But the difference between, and we could do a whole podcast on pleasure. I think we should. In fact, I'm
Yes.
officially inviting you back. What is so interesting is that I was like, oh, I've had so many in my moments of pleasure of all kinds, toes in the sun kind of pleasure where you're like, oh, my feet are warm,
Hmm.
or the breath when the breath is
The
needed
breath.
the most. Okay, so these moments of pleasure, I have these big ahas of like, oh, this is what it's like to be godly.
Yes.
Literally, this is what it's like to be so connected to the source that I am myself pleasure. I'm not
Yeah.
experiencing pleasure. I am pleasure.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
it completely changes the way you operate in the world. We may have digressed a little bit from the topic, but it's so exciting because I think that it is. I'll go back and I will reaffirm that I think that pleasure is a big like pit that we tend to fall
Yes, peace.
into,
Yeah.
even when
Yeah.
we're seeking with that pure heart. It is such a tough one. Can you give us some ways that we are? I mean, I know we've touched on a few just now, but how are you helping people to begin this process? How are we starting off? Like, let's say we feel the wiring of longing that there's more, but we're still caught up in this idea that we're doing something wrong. Where do we begin?
Great question. Well, and first of all, just to finalize that thought, and we can have another podcast on pleasure. What I'm hearing here is that, and this is important to get because this is not what the church teaches. It's quite the opposite, actually, and what society teaches. It's kind of both and, right? But the true example, actually, a really great example of the connection to God, you can find it in Mary Magdalene. And in the last of her days as well, she spent a lot of her time in silence and repose. Repose is like silence and stillness and presence. And in order to have pleasure, you must be present. It's the
Yeah.
only way. It's the
Yeah.
only way. So what we're really talking about here, pleasure, whatever we're going to call it, if that word triggers you, I'm so sorry. We can talk about that later because it should not. It's just presence. It's you're experiencing the sun on your, many people experience the sun on their toes. Not many people experience it in a pleasureful way. And that's
Mm.
because they were not present with the moment.
Wow.
So presence, presence, presence. And again, this is we are not taught these things because the way that we are taught is designed to disconnect you, not to connect you. We have to remember that. So, first of all, how we start this process, right, is we all have to come to a point where we want it. That we want it we want it more than we want our lie.
Mm.
We
Oh.
want it more than we want.
Is that all? Is that all, Sarah? Come on.
It's that easy, you guys.
It's that
It's that
easy.
easy.
And
We-
scene. No.
Yeah.
No, tell me more. Tell me more. I don't want to interrupt, but it's a
yes, and
big
you just
one.
let me
This
know
is
about
a
time.
big one.
Yeah, we have to want something else, something that the knowing that there is more, because you're right, it is a knowing. The beliefs have been acquired, the knowings are always there. So we want to follow the knowing more than we want to cling to our lie or our life, right? We can accept the fact that it may be uncomfortable and we can begin to explore this. From there, I think the steps look very different for many people. But we have to come back to ourselves. We have to come back to our body. Our body is our vehicle. Our body has a lot of information for us. And we have to get a guide. We have to find somebody who is trustworthy to help us explore that body. But we also have to accept the fact that we are sovereign and that we get to choose, who do I listen to? Who do I not listen to? Even if you have a really amazing mentor, you can say, yeah, the thing about advice is that it's optional.
Yes.
It's always optional. So, are you a great person? Yes. Am I going to take that advice? No, because it doesn't fit for me. So, this is a process, you guys, of know thyself.
Yeah.
Know thyself, because on the path back to thyself, you will inevitably meet God.
Yeah.
Inevitably. When you get to know yourself, by the way, the process of doing that is elimination, not acquisition.
Perfect.
Is
Love
let
that.
me eliminate what has been like piled on top of me through years of programming and trauma
Yeah.
and experiences.
Yeah.
Okay, the more I can weave back those layers, the more I actually find my true self. Your true self, you don't have to go out there looking for. You have to go inside to
Yeah.
look for. You have to climb that ladder back up to the heart space. And it's this meeting place, by the way, that there's a word for this called the nous, Nous. The nous is like this very small aspect of the self that is the kind of bridge, conduit between human and divine. And it's there where you find it. It's always there. It's always there. It doesn't go anywhere. It's we who get more outside here into the world. And then we forget to come back to this place that is inside of us, that has the knowing, that has the connection, it has the relationship. And we just follow that.
Yeah.
Follow, follow, follow.
That's so beautiful. Yeah, when I realized I wasn't learning how to do something new, I was just remembering what I already knew. It
Exactly.
actually closed the loop on that idea that I was born imperfect or sinful, and I was somehow always going to be chasing that.
Yeah.
And instead, it was, oh, I am already who I am. I just need to remember how to be connected with the divinity in me.
Yes.
So instead of learning it, I'm remembering it. And I love that process of elimination. So important. It's like, what are we have enough to do, right? What a beautiful thing to choose less. That is not how our culture is set up at all. It's always
Hmm.
choosing more. It's always saying yes. It's always all the things all the
Do
time.
more.
But what if doing less was the way through? What if laying down what doesn't work, what doesn't fit, what isn't right for you? I love your choice. I
You're
love
going to
it.
love
Yeah.
this one.
Please,
This
please.
last thing I have for you.
Yeah,
This
please.
last thing, a term used in this kind of like not agnostic, not agnostic, but Gnostic tradition, which I believe is more closely to the real teachings, by the
Yeah.
way,
Yeah.
is to be naked, is to come
Oh,
naked, completely naked. Now that has deep meaning if you really think about it. And what you just said with the elimination, it's the simplicity. This is not complex. We make it complex because that's what we do as humans oftentimes. But to come naked, to come raw, to come completely stripped.
yes.
That means
Yes.
of your programming. That means
Yeah.
physically, mentally, spiritually. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Thank you. That is an incredible.
so let's get naked.
I love that so much. Yeah, laying down all of those things. What a challenge, right? What a challenge. How much of our ego is wrapped up in, but that's the thing. That's the
Yes.
thing about pulling the ego away from the
Yes.
spirit. So beautiful.
Yes.
What I heard in those last couple of things you were saying is that, that the scripture, the truth will set you free. What is so beautiful about what truth actually is, and you're welcome to also comment on this, that when I started actually telling the real truth, not what I wanted the truth to be, there's a very different thing from what we want it to be. I have a good husband, for instance, or I love my job. What is actually happening there is your desire for those things, not what is true. Sometimes that is true. You love your job. And so when I started actually telling the truth about my life, is that I like aspects of my job. I like aspects of my career.
Yeah.
But the parts that I like about it are not enough anymore for me to stay with it. So what is the
Yeah.
truth? I need a change. Changed my life. But that is what, when you were speaking about that, coming back to yourself, truth is where this sits. It feels like the crux of all of this is what
Yes.
is real truth, as
Yep.
opposed to desire for what could be true. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And there's also a difference between my truth and the truth, by the way. There's that too. But living into our truth is a definite aspect of like feeling aligned and connected. I think oftentimes when people think they're saying one thing based on how they think they'll be perceived when they say it. For instance, when you said, I'm leaving my job. So what the world may think of that is be like, does she not like her job? Does she what is she this? Is she that or whatever? And you're like, no, the truth is that I do love aspects of my job. However, I'm ready to explore something else. Does not mean that everything was bad about that or some
Yeah.
person, right? And we're afraid that it's gonna like hurt somebody of like, I'm leaving my relationship. I'm bad. You don't want me, you don't love me. No, no. In fact, that doesn't have to be true. Like one doesn't have to be true for me to do the other. I
Yeah.
can leave my relationship and still love you, actually. It's just
Yeah.
not for me.
Yes. Beautiful. Wow.
To own that is huge.
It really is a big deal. This has been a beautiful conversation. I feel like maybe we had multiple conversations here because there is so much tied up into this. That is, we could be here a long time unraveling all this, but I feel like I love that we jumped in exactly where we were to see what might be revealed here. And so I'm really, really grateful for your time and your wisdom.
Well, it's been a pleasure for me too. I value the fact that you are open as I am to just show up and be like, what needs to be spoken out in the spoken word today with this
Yeah.
podcast? And we did that.
Yes, I agree.
So
Well,
thank
I
you.
look forward to welcoming you back because I think there's a lot of threads we could pull here.
I absolutely agree. I would love to.
Thanks so much, Sarah. Until next time.
Thank you, Leanne.